The 1962 World Cup in Chile represents a magical era in football. Names evoke certain feelings from fans, and the following are some of the best examples of that. Pele, Garrincha, Didi, Uwe Sila, Cesar Maldini, Zito, Bruno Moura, the list goes on. The 7th edition of the World Cup was a cauldron of established football power, a showing of some of the greatest players the game had ever seen. While it was a platform for sporting gold, it was also an event marred by political divide and underlying hatred that would boil over in one particular fixture. BBC Sports commentator David Coleman called it the most stupid, appalling, disgusting and disgraceful exhibition of football possibly in the history of the game. The Battle of Santiago was not just a football match, it was a clash of cultures, fueled by insults and tensions that ran deep. Let's dive into the backstory that set the stage for one of the most infamous games in World Cup history, Chile versus Italy. In the lead up to the match, two Italian journalists, Antonio Guerelli and Corrado Pizzanelli, painted a derogatory picture of Santiago, the capital of the host nation. They described the city as a backwater dump where the phones don't work, taxis are as rare as faithful husbands, a cable to Europe costs an arm and a leg, and a letter takes 5 days to turn up. And its population is prone to malnutrition, illiteracy, alcoholism and poverty. Their words sparked outrage in Chile, leading to a heated exchange of insults between the two countries. Chilean newspapers highlighted the hypocrisy of the Italians, pointing out the recent doping scandal involving Inter Milan players and the apparent fascism of the nation. The Italian journalists in question were forced to flee Chile, while an innocent Argentinian in a Santiago bar faced the brunt of the backlash, being mistaken for one of the journalists. Italian newspapers didn't help themselves though, adding fuel to the fire as they called Chile's hosting of the World Cup pure madness. Over in the UK, the British press echoed concerns of a brewing storm, with fears of a violent bloodbath on the football field. Meanwhile, Chile's preparations for the tournament were marred by the aftermath of the 1960 Valdivia earthquake, the strongest earthquake ever recorded in human history. The epicenter of the quake was in Lumaco, around 350 miles south of Santiago, causing massive damage to buildings and critical infrastructure. There were 50,000 casualties from the tragedy, with more than 2 million people injured. The impact was so severe that the World Cup committee had to completely reorganize the tournament's calendar to ensure the readiness of the host nation. This disaster would be a sign of things to come as major nations traveled to Chile for the first World Cup in South America since 1950. Chile began the competition brilliantly, beating Switzerland 3-1 at the Estadio Nacional. Elsewhere, Italy played out a 0-0 draw against West Germany in their opening game. Italy would face Chile next, in the heart of Santiago in front of 60,000 fans wanting blood. In order to appease their hosts, the Italian players travelled around the Estadio Nacional before kickoff, handing out flowers to Chilean women. Refereeing the occasion was that of Ken Aston, the man who had a massive foundational legacy in officiating and would go on to invent the yellow and red card system. His face has somewhat become part of the historical memory of the game, being blamed by many Chilean and Italian fans for losing a handle on the event, which would turn violent. The match started with a bang as the first foul was committed just 12 seconds after kickoff. Italy's Giorgio Farini was sent off in the 8th minute after a rough tackle, but chaos only ensued as he refused to leave the pitch, requiring police intervention. The tension reached a boiling point when Chilean winger Lionel Sanchez, who was the son of a professional boxer, broke Humberto Maccio's nose with a punch, while referee Ken Aston was preoccupied dealing with Farini. Sanchez continued his aggressive behaviour, slapping Italian player Mario David in the 38th minute in retaliation. The Chilean once again escaped a booking, but was soon met with an attempted kick to the head by David. Naturally, referee Aston sent off the player, leaving the Azzurri with just 9 men for the second half. The fire and chaos that had gripped the first half didn't lay up in the second, as the police had to intervene multiple times to restore order as the players' tempers flared on the field. The Italians held on until the 73rd minute, when Jamie Ramirez's headed effort put the host 1-0 up. The second came just 3 minutes after, as George Toro put the game to bed with an unbelievable long-range strike. Upon Ken Aston blowing the final whistle, the Italian players fled the pitch, fearing for their safety from the Chile players and fans. The Battle of Santiago was fought and brutally won by the South Americans. The reaction from the public was felt strongly in the days and weeks after the fixture, as tapes of the game had to be flown across the world for television use. The previously mentioned British commentator David Coleman began the BBC's coverage in the UK by condemning the game as the most disgraceful exhibition of football he'd ever seen. Talking to the press, referee Ken Aston reflected on the game by saying, "I wasn't reffing a football match, I was acting as an umpire in military manoeuvres." The fallout from the Battle of Santiago was felt for years to come and is still felt to this day, with tensions running high between the two nations. They would face again a few years later in 1966, where the bitterness still definitely remained from the events of Santiago. But this time, the Italians got their revenge, winning the game 2-0. As for the rest of the 1962 World Cup in Chile, it was very, very uneventful for the Italians, as their loss to the host nation essentially doomed them from the competition. They did indeed go on and beat Switzerland 3-0 in a very comfortable win, but they were dogged and tired and frankly bruised from the events. Italy's journey in the 1962 World Cup was over. As for Chile, they went on to lose 2-0 to West Germany. It wasn't all bad news for the host nation though, as they would go on to beat the Soviet Union 2-1, but then eventually lose out on a place in the final to Brazil, who did beat them 4-2 and would go on to win their second ever World Cup.